Good day, everyone. Today, we will discuss the chapter 9, which is all about improving classroom based assessment tests. In this chapter, we are going to deal with providing practical and necessary ways for improving teacher developed assessment tools. In the year 2011, POPAM suggests two approaches to undertake item improvement: the judgmental approach and the empirical approach. Under judgmental item improvement, we have teacher's own review, peer review, and also the student review. In this approach is basically makes use of human judgment in reviewing the items. The judges are the teachers themselves who know exactly what the test is for, the instructional outcomes to be assessed, and the item's level of difficulty appropriate to his or her class. The teachers, peers, or colleagues who are familiar with the curriculum standards for the target grade level, the subject matter content, and the ability of the learners and the student themselves who can perceive difficulties based on their past experiences.
Teacher's own review. It is always advisable for teachers to take a second look at the assessment. She has advised for a specific purpose. To presume perfection right away after its construction may lead to failure to detect shortcomings of the test or assessment task. So, teacher's own review, ha- there are five suggestions given by POFAM 2011 for the teachers to follow in exercising judgment. The first one is adhere to item specific guidelines and general item writing commandments. The second one is contribution to score based inference. Third, accuracy of content. Fourth, absence of content gaps. And the last one is fairness. So, the first one is adhere to item specific guidelines and general item writing commandments. So, the preceding chapter has provided specific guidelines in writing various forms of objectives and non-objective constructed response types and the selected response types for measuring lower level and higher level thinking skills. These guidelines should be used by the teachers to check how good the items have been planned and written, particularly in their alignment to intended instructional outcomes. So, this portion recognizes the fact that failure to adhere to the written standards in itemized assessment may render to the misalignment of examination. This examination might lead to an easier or rather highly complex questions that may not be suitable in a certain educational setup. So this criterion prevents the likelihood of miscalculated instruction among students. The resulting complexity of these woven items describes the skill required to solve them. Hence, higher level examinations are deemed to sharpen students' critical thinking. So the second one is the contribution to score-based inference. The teacher examines if the expected scores generated by the test can contribute to making valid inference about the learners. Can the scores reveal the amount of learning achieved or move or show what have been mastered? Can the score infer the student's capability to move on to the next instructional level? Or rather the scores obtained do not make any difference at all in describing or differentiating various abilities. So concurrently, these criteria describe the intervention that the educator may consider in making his or her empirical judgment as to how far the students understand the instructions given to them. However, whilst these tests can effectively be used to evaluate students' sound capabilities, they may also indicate any faulty premise of how well they have been taught. This is a recurring relationship between the two fundamental ends of every evaluation in any academic institution that has to be comprehended and given with utmost priority. In addition, the validity of score-based inference depends on how accurately the root of student performance results will be discerned to make a more sensible decision in its application. The third one is the accuracy of content. So this review should especially be considered when tests have been developed after a certain period of time. Changes that may occur due to new discoveries or development can redefine this test of a summative test. If this happens, the items or the key to correction may have to be revisited. Meanwhile, this premise of the review structure focuses on the relevant changes that have to be made in the formulation of basic standardized assessment tests. These changes shall adhere to the most recent findings over a certain time frame of observation and systematic regulation process. Through the use of this flexible mechanism, the educator can become more adept at understanding the unnecessary interventions that have to be inserted into his or her field or specialization. The fourth one is absence of content gaps. This review criterion is especially useful in strengthening the score-based inference capability of the test. If the current tool misses out on the important content now prescribed by a new curriculum standard, the score will likely not give an accurate description of what is expected to be. The teacher always ensures that the assessment tool matches what is currently required to be learned. This is why this is a way to check on the content validity of the test. So the establishment of a solid view of how students outperform a certain test relies on the criterion. Through this, the educator is given the leverage to assess and formulate a better framework for the learners. This shall also include a post-assessment process to point out critical factors of how effective the instruction are based on the set standards of the latest curriculum. Most importantly, the evaluation tools that are to be used hold the same premise as the targeted learning outcomes and goals. The last one is fairness. The discussion on item writing guidelines always give warning on unintentionally favoring the uninformed students obtain higher scores. These are due inadvertent grammatical clues, unattractive distractors, ambiguous problems, and messy test instructions. Sometimes, unfairness can happen because of due advantage received by a particular group, like those seated in front of the classroom or those coming from a particular socio-economic level. Getting rid of faulty and biased items and writing clear instructions definitely add to the fairness of the test. So this lastly is the review criterion of fairness. This portion requires the assessment formulators to remove any intentional or unintentional biases among students of differing levels of cognitive capabilities. Realizing the effectiveness of the test scores require fair judgment based on the standardized learning environment these constructions. So there are schools that encourage peer collegial review of assessment instruments among themselves. Time is provided for this activity and it has almost always yielded good results for improving test and performance-based assessment tasks. Peer review. During this, teacher dyad or triad sessions, those teaching the same subject area can openly review together the classroom test and task they have devised against some consensual criteria. The suggestion given by the test experts can actually be used collegially as basis for a review checklist. The first one checklist is, do the items follow the specific and general guidelines in writing items, especially on being aligned to instructions objectives, making the problem clear and unambiguous, providing plausible options, avoiding unintentional clues, and having only one correct answer. The second one is, are the items free from inaccurate content? Are the items free from obsolete content? Are the test instructions clearly written for students to follow? Is the level of difficulty of test appropriate to level of learners? And the last one, is the test fair to all kinds of students?
So, other than the teacher's own review and also the peer review, we also have the students' review, in which the judgment is based on the students' experience in taking the test, their impression and reaction during the testing event. The process can be efficiently carried out through the use of review questionnaires. So, the engagement of the students in reviewing the items has become a laudable practice for improving classroom tests. POPAM in POFAM 2011 illustrates a sample questionnaire shown in the table 9.1. It is better to conduct the review activity a day after taking the test so the students still remember the experience when they see a blank copy of the text. So here we see the students review, in which it is the table 9.1 item improvement questionnaire for students. Number one, number one question in the questionnaire is that if any of the items seems confusing, which one were they? And then the second one, did any items have more than one correct answer? If so, which one? And then the third one, did any items have no correct answer? If so, which one? Number four, were there words in any items that confused you? If so, which one? And then number five, were the direction for the test or for the particular subsection unclear? If so, which one? Another technique of eliciting students' judgment for item improvement is by going over the test with his or her students before the results are shown. Students usually enjoy this activity since they get feedback on the answers they have written. As they tackle each item, they can be asked to give their answers. As you can see in the table 9.1 nga po, na andun yung mga questions which the students can answer. Then the teacher makes notation for item alteration. Said, since having more than one correct answer signals ambiguity either in the stem or in the given options. The teacher may also take the chance to observe sources of confusion, especially when answers vary. During this session, it is important for the teachers to maintain an atmosphere that allows students to question and give suggestions. It also follows the af- it also follows that after an item review session, the teacher should be willing to modify the incorrect keyed answers. Okay, now we will proceed to the empirically based procedure. An item improvement using empirically based method is aimed at improving the quality of an item using the students' responses to the test. So developers refers to this technical process as as item analysis, as it utilizes data obtained separately for each item. So, an item is considered good if the difficulty index and discrimination index meet certain characteristics. For a norm reference test, these two indices are related since the level of difficulty of an item contributes to its discriminability. Also, if it can discriminate between those who perform well in the test and those who do not. However, an extremely easy item, that which can be answered correctly by more than 85% of the group, or an extremely difficult item, that which can only be answered correctly by 15%, is not expected to perform well as a discriminator. The difficulty index, however, takes a different meaning when used in the context of criteria reference interpretation of testing for mastery. The group will appear to be quite homogeneous with items of this kind. They are weak items since they do not contribute to score-based inference. So, an item with a high difficulty index will not be considered as an easy item. A weak item that displays the capability of the learners to perform the expected outcome becomes an evidence of mastery. Particularly for objective tests, the responses are binary in form, for example, right or wrong, or true or false, translated into numerical figures as 1 and 0. For obtaining nominal data like frequency, percentage, and proportion, useful data then are in the form of A, total number of students answering the item, which is the T, and then B, total number of students answering the item right, which is the R. So, as mentioned earlier about the empirically based procedure, we will now go on the difficulty index, which it is an item's difficulty index is obtained by calculating the p-value, which is the proportion of students answering the item correctly. So as you can see in the PPT, we have the formula of P is equals to R over T, where P is equals in the difficulty index and the R is equals to the total number of students answering the items right, and the T is equals to the total number of students answering the item. So here are the two illustrative samples. As you can see in the right right side, item 1, there were 45 students in the class who responded to item 1 and 30 answered it correctly. So T is equals to 30 over 45. So we have the 30 as the R and the T as the T is 45. So if pag dinivide po natin 30 divided by 45, it is equals to 0.67. And then the item 1 has a p value of C.67. 67% got the item right while the 33% missed it. So for the item number 2 naman po, in the same class, only 10 responded correctly in item 2. So, P is equals to 10 over 45. So, i-divide na naman po natin. So, T ay 10 divided by 45 is equals to 0.22. Item 2 has a p-value of 0.22. Out of 45, only 10 or 22% got the item right, while 35 or 78% missed it. So, for normative reference test between the two items, item 2 appears to be much more difficult item since less than a fourth of the class only was available to respond correctly. And then for criterion reference test, the class shows much better performance in item 1 than in item 2. It is still a long way for many to master item 2. So the p-value ranges from zero point zero to 1.0, which indicates from extremely very difficult as no one got it correctly to extremely very easy as everyone got it correctly. So the zero point zero, ito po yung na ini-indicates niya yung extremely very difficult as no one got it correctly. And then yung 1.0 naman po is extremely very easy as everyone got it correctly or correct. For binary choice item, there's a 50% probability of getting the item correct simply by chance. And then for multiple choice items of four alternatives, the chance of obtaining a correct answer by guessing is only 25. So as you can see, for example, we have a binary choice which is the true or false. Yung true or false nga. So yung probability niya is for us to have a correct answer is the 50%. And then, doon naman po sa multiple choice which we have A, B, C, D, we have 25% since 25 yung A, 25 din yung B, and then C, 25, which we have 100% total. This is an advantage of using multiple choice questions over binary choice items. Ito naman po yung parang positive side nitong multiple choice than the binary choice item for teachers. The probability of getting a high score by chance is reduced.
As mentioned earlier, the power of an item to discriminate between informed and uninformed groups or between more knowledgeable and less knowledgeable learners is shown using the item discrimination index or D. Discrimination index is an item statistics that can reveal useful information for improving an item. Basically, an item discrimination index shows the relationship between the student's performance in an item, or the right or wrong, and his or her total performance in the test represented by the total score. Getting high item total correlation indicate that the items contribute well to the total score, so that responding correctly to these items gives a better chance of obtaining relatively high total scores in the whole test or subtest. For example, in classroom test, the discrimination index shows if a difference exists between the performance of those who scored high and those who scored low in an item. As a general rule, the higher the discrimination index or D, the more marked the magnitude of the difference is, and thus, the more discriminating the item is. The nature of the difference, however, can take different directions. The nature of the differences, first we have the positively discriminating item. Proportion of high scoring group is greater than that of the low scoring group. So when we say high scoring group, this is the group who got the high scores, and the low scoring group is the opposite. So they have the low scores. So and having the positively discriminating item, it means that the high scoring group has a greater proportion that they got the higher grades in the test. So for negatively discriminating item, proportion of high scoring group is less than that of the low scoring group. So in this negatively discriminating item, it means that the high scoring group got a low score in that item, while the low scoring group got the high score in that particular item. So, for example, in item number one, the high scoring group, let's say they have a total of students who total number of 20. So, if it is negatively discriminating item, the high scoring group will have, let's say, 10 students who got the item correctly, while the low scoring group will have 15, higher than that of the high scoring group. So, that's negatively discriminating item. For the not discriminating, proportion of high scoring group is equal to that of the low scoring group. So, calculation of the discrimination index therefore requires obtaining the difference between the proportion of the high scoring group getting the item correctly and the proportion of the low scoring group getting the item correctly using the simple formula, where D is the item discrimination index, um, RU is the number of upper group getting the item correct, and the TU is the number of upper group. So, as you can see in the PPT, so RL is the number of lower group getting the item correct, and the TL is the number of lower group. Another calculation can bring about the same result as Kubizin and Borich 2010. So, D is equals to RU, number of upper group getting the item correct, minus the number of lower group getting the item correct over the number of either group. As you can see, R over T is actually getting the p-value of an item, as to get D is to get the difference between the p-value involving the upper half and the p-value involving the lower half. So the formula for discrimination index, or D, can also be given as by POFAM 2011. So D is equals to PU, which is the p-value for upper group, and the PL is the p-value for lower group. To obtain the proportion for the upper and lower groups responding to the item correctly, the teachers can follow these steps. For letter A, score the test papers using a key to correction to obtain the total scores of the students. Maximum score is the total number of objective items. Letter B is to order the test papers from highest to lowest score. Letter C is to split the test papers into halves, the high group and the low group. For a class with 50 or less students, do a 50-50 split. They take the upper half as the high group and the lower half as the low group. For a big group of 100 or so, take the upper 25 to 27% and the lower 25 to 27%. Maintain the equal numbers of test papers for upper and lower groups. For letter D, obtain the p-value for the upper group and the p-value for the lower group. So we have a formula which is the p upper value is equals to right upper value and the t, or from the total students in the higher group. Oh, and the p lower value, which is the same formula but it is in the lower, the Write lower value over total students in the low group. So letter E, get the discrimination index by getting the difference between the p-values. For purposes of evaluating the discriminating power of items, POFAM 2011 offers the guidelines proposed by Ebel and Frisbee 1991 shown in Table 9.2. The teachers can be guided on how to select the satisfactory items and what to do to improve the test. Guidelines for evaluating and discriminating efficiency of items. Discrimination index, if it is 0.40 and above, it is a very good items. If it is in 0.30 or 0.39, reasonably good items but possibly subject to improvement. If it is in 0.20 to 0.29, marginal items usually needing improvement. For 9.19 and below, poor items to be rejected or improved by revision. Items with negative discrimination indices, although significantly high, are subject right away to revision if not deletion. With multiple choice items, negative D is a forensic evidence of errors in item writing. It suggests the possibility of wrong key or more knowledgeable students selected a distractor, which is the correct answer but is not the keyed option. Or it is an unclear problem in the stem leading to more than one correct answer. Or it is in ambiguous distractors, leading the more informed students be divided in choosing the attractive options. And lastly, implausible keyed option which more informed students will not choose. As you can see, awareness of item writing guidelines can provide cues on how to improve items bearing negative or non-significant discrimination indices.
Distractor analysis. Another empirical procedure to discover areas for item improvement utilizes an analysis of the distribution of responses across the distractors, especially when the difficulty index and discrimination index of the item seem to suggest its being candidate for revision. Distractor analysis becomes a useful follow-up. In simple words, distractor index is a process of examining the destructibility of the incorrect options. In this index, sinusuri kung epektibo ba silang gamitin na pang-distract sa mga choices sa isang item. Just as the key or correct response option must be definitively correct, the distractors must be clearly incorrect or clearly not the best option. In addition, the distractors must also be plausible o kapani-paniwala. Ang distractor ay mahalagang bahagi ng isang item since nagpapakita sila ng kaugnayan sa pagitan ng kabuoang marka at ng distractors na pinili ng mga mag-aaral. An effective distractor ay isa sa mga tool na nagsasabi kung ang item ay mahusay na ginawa o nabigo upang maisagawa ang layunin nito. Nagbibigay daan ito upang suriin kung gaano karaming mga mag-aaral sa upper group at lower group ang pumili ng bawat option sa isang item na maramihang pagpipilian. Inaasahan na ang mga distractors ay pipiliin ng mas maraming mag-aaral sa mas lower group kaysa sa mga mag-aaral na nasa higher group. Ang isang epektibong distractor ay dapat piliin ng ilang mga mag-aaral. And also, the aim of distractors is not to confuse the examinee but to provide a very plausible alternative which she or he may choose in preference to the keyed alternative if she or he does not know the correct answer. Like for example in an item number 1. The question is,
How many moons does Jupiter have? You may see that in the option is in letter A is number 1, letter B 2, and C 62, and the last is 79, which is the correct answer or the keyed answer. The rest of the choices, which is A, B, and C, is what we call the distractors index. Reviewing the options can reveal potential errors of judgment and inadequate performance of the distractors. These poor distractors can be revised, replaced, or resolved. Anumang distractor na pinili ng mas mababa sa 5% ng mga mag-aaral ay itinuturing na isang non-functional distractor or ineffective distractor. To illustrate this process, consider the frequency distribution of the responses of the upper group and the lower group across the alternatives for two items. Separate counts are done for the upper and lower group who chose A, B, C, and D. The data is organized in a distractor analysis table. Sensitivity to instruction index. Another empirical approach for reviewing test items is to infer how sensitive an item has been to instruction. This is referred to as sensitivity to instruction, or SI, and it signifies a change in students' performance as a result of instruction. Its p-value for the post-test is 0.80, while for pre-test is 0.10. Thus, sensitivity index is equals to 0.70. Following this calculation, sensitivity to instruction equals p-value of post-test minus 2, p-value of pre-test is equals to 0.80 minus 0.10 equals to 0.70. Notice that the calculation for sensitivity index carries the same concept as the discrimination index, except that the difference in proportion is obtained between post-test and pre-test given to the same group. Similar to the interpretation, the higher sensitivity index value is the more sensitive the item is in showing the change as a result of instruction. This item statistics gives additional information regarding the efficiency and validity of the item. There could, however, be reasons if sensitivity index of a test item does not register a meaningful difference between post-test and pre-test, especially for a knowledge level item. It is possible that it was not taken at all during instruction, so the students did not have the chance to learn it, or they already know the item prior to instruction. The teacher should take note of these items for reviewing content coverage for the period.